Hello and welcome to Indus News, live from Islamabad. I am Uneeb Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the top stories first. In Gaza, the death toll from incessant Israeli airstrikes has risen to 200, including 59 children and 35 women. More than 1,300 have been wounded as the Israeli bombardment of the besieged Strip enters its second week. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has once again expressed concern over escalating violence a day after the U.S. blocked a UN statement for a third time in a week. But he has asked Israel to provide justification for an attack on media houses. Meanwhile, Indian troops have martyred 2 civilians in occupied Jammu and Kashmir's Srinagar district. The youths were targeted during a so-called cordon and search operation in Khun Mo area of the district. The occupying troops have martyred more than 325 civilians since the revocation of the valley in August 2019. Iran has ruled out agreeing to a preliminary deal with the world powers on the revival of the 2015 nuclear deal during Vienna talks. In a press briefing, Foreign Ministry spokesman Saeed Khatibzadeh said no agreements would be drafted until all conditions are met. He added the 3 working groups have finalized a considerable part of the remaining issues. India has registered over 4,100 coronavirus deaths and more than 281,000 cases in the past 24 hours. In Pakistan, 74 more people lost their lives to the virus, while more than 3,200 tested positive. The global number of coronavirus infections has crossed 163 million, with more than 3.37 million deaths. And in boxing, Tyson Fury has confirmed that his world heavyweight title showdown with Anthony Joshua will take place in Saudi Arabia on the 14th of August. The all-British bout has been billed as one of the biggest in heavyweight boxing for decades, and the winner will become the undisputed champion. These were the top stories. News in detail after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now let's have the news in detail. Start from Gaza, where the death toll from incessant Israeli airstrikes has risen to 200, including 59 children and 35 women. More than 1,300 have been wounded as the Israeli bombardment of the besieged Strip enters its second week. United States Secretary of State Antony Blinken has once again expressed concern over escalating violence a day after the U.S. blocked a UN statement for a third time in a week. But he has asked Israel to provide justification for an attack on media houses. China says the United States has obstructed the Council from speaking with one voice. Meanwhile, rights groups have asked the International Criminal Court to probe Israel's bombing of a building housing media houses as a possible war crime. Now, Turkey says Israel's attacks concern not just Palestinians, but all Muslims, Christians and humanity. Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan was speaking to Pope Francis over a phone call. Erdogan called for unity against the occupier, which does not hesitate to attack religious sanctuaries. He expressed hope that the Pope will continue to issue messages to mobilize the Christian and international community. The Turkish president regretted that UN Security Council has yet to display the required sense of responsibility. He said Turkey is carrying out diplomatic efforts at all relevant international platforms in solidarity with Palestinians. Meanwhile, Indian troops have martyred 2 civilians in occupied Jammu and Kashmir's Srinagar district. The occupying troops have martyred more than 325 civilians since the revocation of the valley in August 2019. The youths were targeted during a so-called cordon and search operation in Hornmoor area of the district. The operation was going on while the whole area has been sealed. Protests erupted in the area after the martyrdom of the youths. Hundreds of people gathered outside the building where the youths were targeted. They chanted anti-India and pro-freedom slogans. Now, Pakistan has conveyed its serious concerns to Afghanistan over its recent irresponsible statements and baseless allegations. In a recent démarche to Kabul's ambassador, Pakistan's Foreign Office emphasized the groundless accusations erode trust and the environment between the two brotherly countries. It urged such actions also disregard the country's constructive role in facilitating the Afghan peace process. Moving on now, Iran has ruled out agreeing to a preliminary deal with the world powers on the revival of the 2015 nuclear deal during talks in Vienna. In a press briefing, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Saeed Khatibzadeh said no agreement would be drafted until all conditions are met. He said the three working groups have finalized a considerable part of the remaining issues. Khatibzadeh added some of those issues are left to be solved through political decisions. The spokesperson said joint commission of the deal would reconvene this week if deemed necessary. Earlier, Russia's envoy in Vienna said he held fruitful discussions related to major issues with the US Special Envoy for Iran, Robert Malley. Now, the UN General Assembly is set to consider a call for an arms embargo on Myanmar's military junta. A UN official said unlike Security Council, General Assembly resolutions are non-binding but carry political significance. Introduced by Liechtenstein with support from EU, Britain and the US, the measure will be considered at a plenary. If approval by consensus cannot be reached, then the full Assembly, which is of 193 member states, will vote on the measure. This comes the day after the army seized a small rebel town in western Chin state which took up arms 3 weeks ago. The junta has killed nearly 800 people across the country in post-coup violence since February this year. India has registered over 4,100 coronavirus deaths and more than 281,000 cases in the past 24 hours. The global number of coronavirus infections has crossed 163 million, with more than 2.37 million deaths.
The COVID-19 crisis in India has exacerbated the country's multi-pronged calamities emanating from its fragile socio-economic and political fabric. A top Indian virologist resigned from the government's panel of advisors on coronavirus variants weeks after questioning the authorities' handling of the pandemic. Indian doctors have been recording a huge spurt in cases of mucormycosis, an aggressive hard-to-treat fungal infection among COVID-19 patients. Residents living in the riverbanks are getting extremely anxious as more floating bodies keep appearing in Indian rivers. They said hundreds of bodies are being buried at the riverbank every day. Meanwhile, in the tough times, a food delivery network across Mumbai has been offering free lunches to help out patients on a budget.
When the second lockdown started, it was so hard to buy food because everything was shut down. These people give the food here, which is really tasty and fills our stomachs. And we can save money. Whatever money we are saving is going for better medical treatment.
In England, a cross-party inquiry group has demanded a public inquiry into whether Prime Minister Boris Johnson's decision to delay adding India to the travel red list of countries was influenced by his desire to start trade talks with New Delhi. As the UK has eased more restriction, health experts said people should avoid socializing indoors to prevent the Indian variant. Saudi Arabia has opened its land, air and sea borders today after more than a year of restrictions. The country announced that foreign vaccinated visitors arriving by air will no longer need to quarantine.
Thank God, after a year and a half of banning traveling, today we can travel. Thanks to God. Now someone can finish his work, whether it is for tourism or for business. And hopefully this pandemic will get to an end, so everyone can travel, God willing.
US top infectious disease expert Dr. Anthony Fauci said undeniable effects of racism have led to severe health disparities that especially impacted African Americans, Hispanic Americans, and Native Americans during the pandemic. A new poll has showed that more than 80% of Japanese oppose hosting the Olympics this year, with just under 10 weeks until the Tokyo Games.
Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 74 more people have lost their lives to the coronavirus as the country's death toll approaches 20,000. The Health Ministry has reported more than 3,200 new cases overnight as the country's caseload tops 88,000. It said that nearly 78,000 people have recovered so far from the virus. Meanwhile, more than 3.8 million doses of the vaccine against coronavirus have been administered so far. Now, in Tunisia, security forces have killed 5 suspected militants in the mountains near the border with Algeria. Security officials said a joint operation by police and armed forces is still ongoing. 6 years ago, an ISIS militant killed 39 foreigners on a beach in the coastal city of Sousse, triggering an exodus of tourists. Now, Russia seeks to outlaw the political movement of jailed Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny. A Russian court is ready to hear an extremism case against the Navalny political network. The court hearing comes as a sweeping crackdown against the political movement of Putin's most staunch critic. The Russian parliament's lower house is also set to debate a bill that would bar political activism as part of the crackdown. The bill will prevent individuals from alleged extremist organizations from being elected. Prosecutors in Russia had earlier labeled the Navalny network as extremist after criticism from the Kremlin. Russian treatment of Navalny in jail has already prompted global outrage and criticism. Now moving to Chile, where the ruling coalition Chile Vamos is expected to fall short of keeping themselves in control of the constitutional delegates' vote. According to the electoral authorities, CERVEL, the coalition has secured just 21% of the votes. Independent candidates have emerged as the winners of the elections with 69% of the votes counted. Local media projected that independents would win 45 seats, Chile Vamos 39, and the centre-left 25, and the far left would take 28. The ruling coalition needs at least a one-third of the majority in the elections to push for a constitutional reform. Changing the constitution was a central demand to emerge from fierce social protests that erupted over inequality and elitism in October 2019. Since then, the popularity of the ruling coalition has greatly decreased owing to pandemic handling and other economic issues. Now, in Peru's socialist presidential candidate Pedro Castillo and right-wing Keiko Fujimori are neck and neck just 3 weeks before the runoff. A voter simulation shows Castillo has 51.1% support and Fujimori 48.9%. Another poll shows Castillo leading Fujimori in voting intentions by 36.5% to 29.6%. Both have outlined new taxes and royalties for miners in their campaigns. Castro says he will raise taxes and royalties on the mining sector and renegotiate tax contracts of large companies if elected. Fujimori, contesting from jail over human rights abuse, has also pledged to distribute Peru's mineral wealth more evenly. It's time for a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now, in the US, a Union Pacific train hauling hazardous materials has derailed and caught fire in the city of Sibley, Iowa. Authorities say dozens of people were evacuated and there were no reports of injuries or fatalities. They said the derailment involved 47 rail cars, while an inquiry to know the cause of the incident is under investigation. The fire chief in Sipley said the train was carrying fertilizer and ammonium. Now, India's western state of Gujarat is braced for a landfall of a severe cyclone Tauktae, likely to be the strongest to hit the region since 1998. The storm has roared up India's western coast over the past 2 days, with 6 people dead and thousands evacuated. Efforts are currently underway to rescue more than 400 people stranded off the coast in 2 commercial barges. The cyclone is likely to make landfall on early Tuesday and comes amid a devastating COVID-19 wave that has overwhelmed India's healthcare system. And moving to Brazil, with the Amazon region here, thousands of families have been affected by heavy rains and flooding brought by the La Nina weather phenomenon. Ongoing since last year, the event is characterized by usually cold temperatures in parts of the Pacific Ocean. It has sparked chaos in the town of Anama, where a state of emergency has been declared. Families use boats and canoes to move around the town, home to 14,000 people. The floods could become the worst in a century, with some 350,000 people affected. Now, the European Union has been urged to toughen its weak environmental targets for the reduced emission of carbon dioxide. European Campaign Group Transport and Environment said the bloc needs to shift to electric vans to cut emission and reduce fossil fuel usage. The group said the environmental targets of the EU are very weak and it needs to step up to ensure the goal of 31% emission reduction. It has demanded that the EU should prevent van makers from building plug-in hybrid vans that rely on fossil fuel engines. The group said the EU should set a 100% carbon dioxide reduction target by 2035. The World Health Organization says working long hours is killing hundreds of thousands of people every year. The study warns the worsening trend may accelerate due to the pandemic.
The first global study on the loss of life associated with longer working hours has depicted some horrifying effects on human health. A paper published in the Environment International Journal shows that 1 in every 10 people globally worked long hours in 2016, while 745,000 people died from diseases associated with overwork in the same year.
We found working 55 or more hours per week increased risk of dying of ischemic heart disease by 17% after 10 years. This was based on data from 340,000 participants in 22 cohort study globally. We also found working 55 hours or more per week increased the risk of having a stroke by 35%.
The joint study by WHO and the International Labour Organization shows that most of the victims were men. Officials say the surge in remote working due to COVID-19 and the economic slowdown may have increased the risk.
We have some evidence that shows that when countries go into national lockdown, the numbers of hours work increased by about 10%. This is from a study from the National Bureau of Economic Research in the United States across, I think, 15 countries in 2 regions. They've shown there is an increase in working hours. So this might well be operating through teleworking, but we don't know enough quite yet, but it looks like it.
According to the study, people living in Southeast Asia and the Western Pacific were most affected.
Now, in Peru, a zoo in the capital Lima is presenting 2 endangered baby American crocodiles born through artificial insemination.
Endangered crocodiles born via artificial insemination are making their first appearance at the Huachipa Zoo. The zookeepers say the baby crocs were born in February and are doing well. They say the crocs are almost 3.5 months old now and measure 26 centimeters in length. The crocodile eggs were incubated for 90 days and were the only surviving 2 out of 24.
One of them was born weighing 35 grams, the other weighing 40. Now that they are 3 months and 10 days old, The animals have gained more than 70 grams per individual. So those animals were born with 17 centimeters total body length. And as of today, they are 26 centimeters long. That is, the animals are on the right track. They are developing well.
Crocodiles are still classified as an endangered species, although the number of large reptiles have rebounded in some parts of the world.
These animals are currently in danger of extinction. Their population in the wild is reduced due to the pollution of their natural habitat. Their habitat is being used by people and also by agricultural workers. Any reproduction in captivity is a conservation success.
According to experts, the American crocodile, which can grow up to 16 feet, are shy and reclusive. They can be found in countries like Mexico, Venezuela, Peru, Ecuador, and the United States.
Now, in Mexico's Andrea Meza has crowned the new Miss Universe as the competition was finally held after a year delayed due to the pandemic. The 26-year-old Meza was selected from 73 other candidates representing their countries and territories. She was presented the crown by Miss Universe 2019 Zozibini Tonzi, a ceremony held in Hollywood, Florida. According to her contestant biography, Meza holds a degree in software engineering. The show was co-hosted by Maria Lopez and former Miss Universe Olivia Culpo, and also featured a special performance by Luis Fonse. Now, European stocks have dipped as global investors weighed concerns of a rise in inflation and an increase in coronavirus cases. The pan-European stock 600 hovered fractionally below the flat line in early trade. The autos added 0.7%, while travel and leisure stocks dropped 0.7%. The UK's domestically focused mid-cap index was flat, but hovered near a one-week high as the British economy reopened. Earlier, Asia stocks traded mixed as investors react to the release of Chinese economic data. And also, Bitcoin saw partial recovery after Elon Musk clarified in a tweet that Tesla has not dumped its holdings. Earlier this weekend, tweets hinted Tesla is considering or may have already sold some of its massive holdings. Bitcoin fell more than 9% on Monday to a three-month low of $42,185. But it later rallied more than 5% to cross $45,000. Musk has done a U-turn on the cryptocurrency in the past week. He announced that Tesla will stop accepting Bitcoin due to fears that its energy use is hurting the planet. Now let's have a look at the weather updates. And that is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.